Namaskar, good evening, and a very warm welcome to you all today to this special event where I will be speaking about the relationship between aesthetic and mathematics in Indian music, and then I will be singing for you all. I'll be performing Hindustani classical recital. It's a pleasure and privilege to be doing these two events at such a prestigious institution. I would like to thank the cultural committee, which is led by Mr. Anup Dikshit, for organizing this, taking the pains. These two events needed a lot of effort from their side, and I'm very, very thankful for taking so much of effort and making it happen. In my speech, when I am talking about aesthetics and mathematical inputs in music, Indian music, I will touch on the nature of musical sound first, briefly on aesthetics, what is aesthetics, and then I will proceed to talk about the evolution of the musical scale and the mathematics behind it, right from ancient times, talking about Vedic music, to medieval times, and then the music of the current times, the musical scale rather, and then how it may look like in the future. This is going to be my line of thoughts that I'm going to share with you. So, as I mentioned that briefly about the nature of musical sound. So, at any given point in time, all of us are subjected to countless number of sound waves. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, apart from my voice, there are many other sound waves that are reaching your ears. But we are not able to process, our brain is not able to process all these sound waves. Out of the lot of sounds that we have, we all know that there is an audible range of 20 hertz to 20k hertz that a human ear can receive and the brain can process. Probably this is what was intended when this was written in the Rig Veda, that only 1/4 of the available sound can be perceived by human brain. The rest of it is of no use to us. Imagine if all the sound, if we were listening to all the sound, it would be so cacophonic. And it would be very, very difficult for us to understand what all is going on around us. So thankfully, we can only listen to 1/4 of the available sound. Now, in the range that we can perceive, there is some sound which is pleasurable and enjoyable, and some sound which is not so. What is the determining feature? What determines whether a sound is pleasurable to us or not? Is it random or there is some logic? Is there some math behind it? This is something that we are going to try and decipher and understand today. So, before we begin, I just want, for the benefit of all our listeners today, I would just like you to go through this table where I have made a comparative chart of the nomenclatures of the notes of three genres. One is Western, the other is Hindustani in the center, and the third one is Carnatic music. These two, Carnatic and Hindustani music, both of them are the great musical genres of our nation. We are blessed to have not one, but two classical genres, which is a very seldom phenomena in any part of the world. Fortunately, we have this. Now, if you just look into the chart, so I think all of you know that there are 7 notes: Shadaj, Rishabh, Gandhar, Madhyam, Pancham, Dhaivat, Nishad. Sare, Gama, Pada, Nisa, as we call them very in their very popular forms. Now, along with that, we also have 5 more notes. They are called subsidiary variants. So you can infer that it was not enough to have 7. The musician wanted some more pleasing sound. So 5 more sounds were taken into account, and the scale then had 12 notes in all. So if you see from the I will talk from the Hindustani perspective. The Hindustani Sa and then Rishabh, that is having a bar below. So that's a variant of the Rishabh. Then there is the middle column. Then there is Shuddha Rishabh. Then there is Gandhar, which is also having a bar. That is the softer version of the next Gandhar, which is the pure form. Then there is a Madhyam. Then in the next, moving on to the next section, we have Tivra. If you can see that Tivra Madhyam, that is a sharper version of the pure version of Madhyam. Pancham is just one. We don't have another variant of Pancham. Dhaivat again, Dha, you'll see 2 variants, one softer and one sharper. And then there is Ni. I'm sorry for the typo. It should be Nishad with a bar below. And then there is the Shuddha Nishad. So all the notes that have got a bar, they are all the variants, and the others are the pure notes. So this is how we get 12 notes in all. Carnatic classical music also follows the same, but the nomenclature is slightly different. They have 3 types of Rishabh. We have 3 types of Gandhar in Carnatic music, but there are overlapping. Therefore, the nomenclature is such. I am sure you can make out from this chart. And of course, we have the C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B. These are the Western notes. They also have their softer and sharper versions. So this is how we have 12 notes. This is just for your general information, because we are going to talk about the evolution of this scale in the Indian context and the Western context a little later. Now, talking briefly on aesthetics. What is aesthetics? Basically, anything that pleases our senses, that de-stresses us, that brings us pleasure, is considered to be aesthetic. And a great German philosopher, Immanuel Kant, has defined aesthetics as enjoyment and appreciation of beauty, often in art, be it form, design, color, or sound. Kant has classified aesthetics into 2 sections. One is the universal aesthetics, and the other is subjective aesthetics. Universal aesthetics, those things that are established as pleasant and beautiful or enjoyable. There are certain things that mostly all of us feel that this is nice, this is good. Subjective, which is more individualistic, where I may like something, but some other person may not like it as much as I like it. So these are the 2 aspects of aesthetics. We are going to discuss of the universal aesthetics and music, and also a little bit about subjective. This area is rather mysterious, and much needs to be understood and worked on, I feel. But nevertheless, we are going to discuss that as well. Now, coming to sound. So, sound has to be produced somewhere outside our bodies. which happens due to friction of two bodies. If there's no friction, there's no activity, there's no sound. So sound definitely needs some activity outside, some kind of friction. With that friction, there is some disturbance in the atmosphere, and that disturbance, which we called as waves, it's the disturbance is in the form of waves. The molecules are displaced, and there is progressive, uh, pulsation that is created. That pulsation reaches our eardrums. So there is production, there is propagation, and then there is perception, where our eardrums take these pulses to the brain via auditory nerves, and then the brain deciphers or processes as to the sound is pleasing or not pleasing, or noise, or however it is to a person. This is the process in which sound is created, propagated, and perceived. Now we come to musical sound. So, as I said, there is a lot of sound around us, but what is the nature of a sound that is pleasing, and in today's context, musical? Any sound wave that has got some amount of, as I mentioned, that sound travel in form of waves. Now these waves could be of any random nature depending on how the sound has been produced. So the sound waves that have got some kind of uniformity, some kind of periodicity, and a sizable amount of viscosity and resonance are generally pleasing to us. This is how we perceive the musical sound. So any sound wave which has got these two, three qualities, there must be some amount of uniformity in that sound or stability in that sound wave, and also some amount of length. So like when I'm talking, any point where I wait, it kind of gets a musical nature. That, and then of course there is resonance, which is a very, very important feature of a sound wave to make it musical. These are the features that make a sound wave musical. And in Indian scriptures, any musical sound is known as nad. So for us to understand nad a little scientifically, nad is a musical sound wave. Now let us understand a little bit about the structure of a nad or musical sound wave. How does it look like? So when we pluck a string of any musical instrument, it vibrates. We all know that. Now, it vibrates in a rhythmical fashion. It doesn't vibrate randomly. And this is the pattern in which it vibrates. So, there is a fundamental frequency that is produced, which is the basic sound. But as I said, that a musical sound needs to be resonating. So there are more overtones or harmonics or subsidiary sound waves also that are produced along with this fundamental frequency. And if we look at the nature of these vibrations, we will notice, of course, they are called, there's the first is the fundamental, and then the second harmonic, third harmonic. The harmonics are the overtones or the subsidiary sound waves that are produced. And when we look at the nature of these waves, we see that they move in arithmetic progression. So if the basic frequency of the fundamental sound wave is 100, the next will be 200, third will be 300, 400, 500 with a difference of 100. This is how it moves. I would like the ninth slide to be played, please. And this is how it sounds. Now, if you notice, most of these sounds are quite pleasant and kind of familiar to us, because these are the 7 sounds and the other 5 sounds that we have established in our musical scale. So this is a wonderful aspect of music, that every naad or a musical sound already has the notes that are generally played for any composition. So, any sound that you play, if it is musical in nature, it will create these harmonics or these overtones. That means these notes also. And therefore, now we understand that the seven notes as they are did not come from somewhere, just randomly. They were perceived, because this kind of information is very new. Only when the machines came, then only we could understand these things. But man has been practicing the seven notes from time immemorial, maybe even in stone age. So how could he understand these sounds? Of course, it was more rudimentary, it was more basic at that time, but still, this is how the sound has been. The seven swaras, in terms of from the point of view of Indian music, have been there in the Samved as well. So even without listening to them through a machine, this perception, this likening for these sounds, and therefore establishing them in an octave, happened thousands of years ago. So this is when I understood this fact, I was really amazed, because I found this very, very. Uh, it was a great revelation to me that these sound waves, the seven notes have been generated from the harmonics of the sound, that the musical sound or nad. So this was about the structure of a musical sound or nad. So I have just, I mean, this is, you can just understand that this is the value of the harmonics that have been created. No? This slide, these values of these waves, these are the sounds that have been created. There is sa, and then there is tar sa, the next harmonic. That's the first harmonic. Then the second harmonic is pancham, and then there is tar sa again. Then there is gandhar. Now, what is very, very interesting in this to understand is that the best consonating sounds are sounds that are in whole ratios, big whole ratios. For example, the first overtone that is produced is double of the basic. So that means the ratio is 2:1. That is the most consonating sound, if you talk about combinations. So, this is how the two limits of the octave were established, the first sa and then the tar sa. You know that sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa, the last sa. This is how these two limits were established. But this was not enough to create sound, to create music. So some more sounds were selected. So then you see that there is pancham, that is the third or the second harmonic. That is also in the ratio of 3/2, if you look at it from the frequency point of view, which we'll see later on. Now, this also was considered to be a very, very pleasing combination. Now, it's important to understand here that music and musical notes are based on consonance. If they are not consonating, they are not pleasing, and they do not solve the purpose. So, therefore, it is important that these musical notes that were derived or that were evolved slowly as a music scale must be consonating with each other. And was this random again, if we ask? No, there was some mathematics in this as well. So you see that the most consonating sounds are in the ratio of 2:1. Then, if you see Sapa, it is in the ratio of 3:2, which I will, in a little while, I'll show you it in the chart. This is how, so the ratios that are bigger are more consonating. And then if the distance between the two notes is very small, for example, Sa and Komal Rishabh, the next note, that is not so consonating. That is considered to be dissonating. So this is how, based on the consonating sounds, the musical scale was evolved uh, right from our ancient times. So, as I said, that the scale and its evolution is what we are going to discuss today. So you see, there is some logic, there is some math behind the evolution of a scale. This does not just occur randomly. I would now like to just speak a little bit about Vedic music, in which we understand the evolution of Indian musical scale, the seven notes, and another concept which is very interesting, and that's the concept of shrutis or microtone. Now, in in Indian context, a scale always is in descending form, because when we speak, if you've noticed, we always start with a bigger, higher pitch, and then we go down. While I am speaking right now, and you will see that I speak, my first utterance is little higher pitch, and then slowly, as my breath dies, my pitch also goes down. So this is how it was perceived. Therefore, the first note that was understood in Samved, I I don't want to get much go into much details of the into the Vedic music as such, but just for your information, music has always been a very, very integral part of the Vedic chants, right from the Rig Veda times, because our tradition has been oral. It was all the Vedic ritas were transferred from one generation to another generation orally, and therefore music or some kind of pitch cadence helped the person to remember the chants better. So some kind of rhythm and some kind of sound. Now, in Rig Veda, the sounds were rough. They were not the tonal zone. They were just tonal zones. There weren't many, segregation of tones. And slowly, by the time the fourth Ved, that is the Sam Ved, was written, Sam, by the way, is another name for Swar. So Samved was highly, highly musical, and all the chants were in very complex and refined musical compositions. It resembled a lot like the operatic music that we have today, where there were sets of singers. There were about 20 odd people, or many, many people rather, who were singing, and there were sets of singers, some singing the lower notes, the lower sound, some singing higher sound, and so on. There was also some orchestration. This is how the ritas were chanted in the Vedic times. But coming back to the evolution of scale, so we see, as I mentioned, that we always start at a higher pitch and then we slowly go down. So this is how the scale also evolved. The first note was therefore considered as Gandhar, that is the Pratham. If you see that in the second in this series of notes, Pratham, then there was Re, Dvitiya, then Sa, Tritiya, then Chaturth, that is Ni, that is lower Ni, then Mandra, that is a lower note. So, Sa, Ga, Re, Sa, Ni, Dha. This is Mandra, this is going down. Pa, this has gone further down. So this is how it was named. Pratham, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturth, Mandra, and Atiswar. And then one more note was added above Ga, which is known as Krusht. Krusht means like a scream. So Ga, Ma, this was Krusht. So then we get Krusht, Pratham, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturth, Mandra, Atiswar. Now, what is interesting here to understand is these notes are related to those harmonics that we heard earlier. So ma ga re sa ni da pa. Again, a little bit of variation in the sounds of the ancient Indian music traditions, which again I would not like to get into. It's a little more detailed and not really relatable to the topic that I have to speak to about today. So this is how I just wanted you all to understand that this is how the Samvedic sound, the notes were named. And of course, the sound was a little different, but more or less the same. And more important, it related to the harmonics that are created by a nad. That is something very important to understand here. Now we come to, so this, if you understand it from the point of view of aesthetics, as I mentioned, universal aesthetic, this was something that was, it was like an established fact that these sounds are pleasant to listen to, and therefore complicated compositions can be made in these with the mixture of these sounds or assortment of these sounds can make musical compositions. So this was kind of, you can consider it as universal aesthetic, something that has been established very well and accepted by all and probably enjoyed by all as well. We now come to another very, 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 what should I say, intense or a very strange kind of a zone, which is Shruti Jati, if you understand the second part. And here, the concept of microtone evolved, and I'm talking about the Samvedic time. This is when this happened. So what is Shrutis? What are Shrutis? What was Shruti? How was Shruti Jati conceptualized during the Samvedic times? These notes, as I mentioned, the seven notes mentioned above, sometimes they may not necessarily convey the mood or the emotion that is being intended to convey. For example, there is a note, this I'm talking from today's perspective. There's a note, Sa Re Maya Malav Gola, Komal Rishabh, all of us know that, Bhairav in Hindustani. So that uses the Komal Rishabh or the softer version of Rishabh. Sa Re. This is the note that is used. But there is a rag called Marva in which Komal Rishabh is little sharp, because Marva is an evening rag, a rag which is sung during sunset, and it has got some graveness or some kind of, melancholy and some kind of deep emotions. So this ray seems brighter for that particular emotion. It doesn't cater to that feeling of Marva, because Marva needs even lower ray than this. So sa re seems brighter. It doesn't seem, appropriate for the feeling that I need for Marva. So I hope you understand from this that these notes were beautiful, they were consonating, but they did not cater to all the emotions that were needed to be expressed by an artist, or the poetry. If the poetry is having certain theme or certain ras, we have the navrasas, then the notes should also have that kind of, that kind of flavor or that kind of mood. It should reverberate the mood of the poetry or whatever the singer wants to, whatever message the singer wants to convey. This is very similar to, if I say, red color. So, red color in any painting, you cannot just go with one color. That's not enough. Sometimes you need maroon, sometimes you need orangish red. So you need shades of red for different paintings. Just one red will not do. Therefore, in the same way, just the seven notes, like seven colors, were not enough. We needed more shades. Microtones relate to that concept. So microtones basically in the Samvedic period, the Shruti Jati, this is what we call microtones in Hindi, are known as shrutis. So in the Samvedic literature, we find mention of these microtonal usage, where according to the mood of the poetry, shades of notes were used. So every note had three, four shades, five rather. There are five Shruti Jatis that have been mentioned in our books. So that means one shade one note had two or three lower shades, and some of them were little sharper. So supposing it was a happy song, so probably sharper notes would work. Sad song, probably softer versions would work. Something like that. Now, therefore, our Carnatic classical music has got this overlapping note nomenclature. If you must have seen the previous chart I had mentioned, so there was R1, R2, R3. R3 is this. R2 is the same as G1. So because this is how we perceived music. So there were seven bright spots, but there were also subsidiary lights around them, which were used as the artist wanted sometimes, and there was sometimes some instruction also to be, to use microphones in a particular manner. So this is the concept of Shruti Jati or microtones, which we had in the Samvedic period. And then, of course, these Shrutis were explained in great detail in a great treatise called Natya Shastra, which was written by Muni Bharat, which was I this is just for your information. You can just go through this. So this was written around 500 BC to 200 CE. We do not know exactly when it was written, probably over a period of 100 years, and probably by a school of musicians or scholars who were under Bharat Muni. Probably, definitely not by one person. So this book was actually a book of theater, Natya Shastra. But theater has all these, encompasses a huge range of performing arts. So there is music, there's dance, there is abhinay, there's literature, there's costume, there is orchestration. All this is part of theater. And Natya Shastra has given a detailed technical account of all these sections of performing arts and music also. Natya Shastra has dedicated about 6 chapters of detailed technical musical information. Now, this you can understand that this is a culmination of the research work of the music that was has been mentioned here and there in the Vedas. So because Vedas were not, musical books, they were just they were philosophical, scriptures, but they did mention some musical information and some musical practices. All that was understood, researched, deciphered, and then mentioned in Natya Shastra. And therefore, this concept of Shruti Jati was mentioned in quite a great detail in Natya Shastra, where Muni Bharat did a lot of experiments with the Veena and figured out that there are 22 such Shrutis in an octave. So if you take one sa, re ga ma pa da ni sa, so in between, of course, these are the 7 notes that I've just mentioned, and we generally do our music only in these 7 notes and the 5 other notes that I'd mentioned before, so 12 altogether. But apart from that, there are 22 shrutis actually, or 22 microtones that are present. That means there are these many audible sound waves that could be made use of while creating a composition. Shruti, shruyate iti shruti. That means something that can be listened to. That is shruti. So any sound that can be differentiated from the other sound, and it's a musical sound, of course, any nad, I would say, is a shruti or a microtone. So Bharat Muni identified 22 shrutis, microtones, and placed 7 notes, Shuddha Saptak or Sharaj Gram, in these 22 shrutis. So we are now actually getting into the more detailed scale formation. Abhi to we just understood the 7 notes in the octave, but as I mentioned, that was not enough. We needed more notes, and then that is how this concept of Shruti Jati came about. Then, when Bharat did the experiment, he found that there are 22 audible nads or musical sounds in a scale. This is how it was. So, how do you understand which is a microtone? So, for example, if I take one sound wave or nad of frequency 240 and then move on to 241 or 240.5, the difference is so small between these two that my ear may not be able to differentiate between these two sounds. But if I move on and on for some time, maybe 248 or some sizable amount of difference, then probably I can make out that this sound is different from 240. So when I am able to differentiate between these two sounds, these two musical sounds or nads, then I call them Shruti. So between two Shrutis, there are several nads. Several meaning 240.005. If you see it from a digital point of view, there are many nads, just countless. But they are of no use because we can't hear them, and definitely can't sing. So for a nad, for a shruti, to get that name, it must be differentiable from the other sound waves in and around it. And that is how Bharat figured out that there were 22 such audible nads, which he called 22 shrutis. Out of these 22 shrutis, there was again some maths whereby how do you how do you place your notes in these 22 shrutis? You just can't place them randomly. Or okay, all right, let me keep first as sa, and then maybe fifth as re, and maybe then 10th as, you don't go just by a random choice. There has to be some logic behind it. So what Bharat understood was that the difference of 13 shrutis was most consonating. And that was the difference between sa and pa. It's the same as that harmonic. If you remember, the second harmonic was sa and pa, and the ratio of, if you consider it from the frequency point of view, the ratio is 2:1. Sorry, 3:2. 3:2. So that was the most consonating sound. So that is how Pancham was placed at the 13th Shruti. Then similarly, so by this understanding of this consonance, basically, he placed his notes. And when you look at the ratios of these consonating sounds, you find something. These are the names of the 22 Shrutis: Tivra, Kumudati, Manda, Chandovati, Dayavati, Rajni. These are mentioned in the scripture. He also named the 22 Shrutis. And this is how he placed his Shrutis. So the first one was in the fourth Shruti, then there was seventh Shruti Re, then Gandhar was in the ninth Shruti, then Ma was 13th, 17th was Pa. So Pa and Sa ka difference is 13. Then there is Dha, Ni. This is how he had placed his Shrutis in a certain order in these 22 microtones. And this order was determined by the frequency ratio that these notes had with each other. And if you understand that, this is how it looked like. So you see, Sa, Pa, and Sa, Ma were the most consonant. After Sa to Sa, which is the best consonants, we have Sa, Pa, and Sa, Ma, which are the most consonating notes. And therefore, if you must have, I mean, those of you who are, who know about the tuning of the Tanpura, you notice that we tune a Tanpura in Pancham, Sa, Sa, and Sa. That is how we tune a Tanpura, because of the wonderful consonants they have. So this is how you see the ratios between the very consonating note combination. The first one, Sapa and Sama, they're the most consonating combinations. They are isht. That means there is some bonding between the two. And the ratio is 2:3 and 3:4 in their frequency order, if you look at the frequencies. Then Sa, Ga, and Sa, Dha. If you see the ratio, there's 4:5 and 3:5. Then the Sa Komal Gandhar, Sa Komal Dhaivat, they are not so consonating. So you see the ratio is now becoming smaller. And then Sa Re is 8:9, which is even lesser. And then, of course, there is the most dissonating is Sa Komal Rishabh, that is 15/16. So because they're just together, Sa, and then the next note is Komal Rishabh only. If you understand this also in the form of colors, which might make it a little simple to understand. So black and white are like the Sas, the two Sas. They are the most sharp. Then you have zones of gray. So something which is nearly white, little grayish, is not is dissonant with white, because you hardly can make any difference between white and little white. But something which is really gray is like the pancham. Then a deeper blackish, the knee will be very close to black. So again, the consonance is not so great there as well. So those are sounds that are not so good together. So therefore, the Sa and Komal Re together will be very dissonating or confusing to the listener. But consonants that are in a bigger ratio are better to listen to. So this is how the establishment of the 7 notes in the scale of 22 microtones was done by Bharat. It was done on the basis of consonance. And when later on, he did not find out this ratio and all this, because there was no frequency concept at that time. But when the machines were, up and running, maybe 200, 300, 400 years back, this is what was understood. that these notes have been placed, and this relates again to the harmonic series that we had played. So see, this is the connection, and this has all been done manually. There was no machines at that time, but this is how. So what I'm trying to understand, I mean, my point here is that the seven notes that came by had some math basically. So that's what I mean to say, that it was not random. There was some mathematics behind it. But there are also zones where there is a little bit of abstractness, and that is the zone of the shrutis, or the microtones. So microtones then were very customized swaras that were used depending on the mood of the whatever song or poetry that was being rendered. I hope I'm making myself clear and not very boring and intense. I'm sorry if that's the case, because I need to put forth my point and carry on with what I've prepared for you all. I really hope that you find it all interesting. So we move on now to the. This is beautiful, and I thought I must share it with you. Matang was a great Vidwan in the 6th or 7th century AD. And this he wrote a very important book called Brihad Deshi, in which mostly Indian scholars have been following the theories of Natya Shastra, all the principles laid down by Bharat in Natya Shastra, but there had been changes with the changing time. Of course, things have been evolving and new things were coming up, so those were also being added. So, Motang wrote this. Shrutis seem to be of variable size and were identified more by instinct and demonstration rather by calculation. So, what I understand from this, and this is so beautiful and profound, is that not everything can be quantified or calculated. you know we can have spots or areas, but beyond that, then things start becoming very ambiguous and blurred, and aesthetics beyond that become subjective. So that's what is written in this. Shrutis seem to be of variable size and were identified more by instinct and demonstration rather by calculation. The progression of certain shrutis result into culminating shruti, which manifests itself into a swar. So there are three, four shrutis: lower sa, slightly higher, acute sa, finally. Then there is lower re, slightly acute re, higher re, like that. All in all, the Indian ideology supported both the continuity of nad, millions of which are present in a scale, to a flow of shrutis, audible nads, to their eventual manifestation into illuminated swaras. So I'm really in love with this concept, where there is continuity, there is ambiguity, as well as there is clear spotting also. So aesthetics understood in in the universal as well as in the subjective perspective, in both these ways. So the swaras are the universally acceptable, beautiful, consonating set of sound, and the shrutis are rather ambiguous and little customized. They not only depend on the nature of the object or the poetry that is being, or the song that is being presented, but also on the singer or on the person who is presenting. He may have his own way of saying a particular note. So this is where the subjective aesthetics comes into play. This draws a parallel to the idea of dual nature of matter, which exhibits both which exhibits both wave and particle-like properties. Eventually, the above phenomena resonates with the ancient Indian philosophy of continuity in the real world, and our encounter with the discontinuous and limitation of ordinary experiences. So probably there are a lot of things happening all the time, and each one of us has our story, because each one of us is relating to certain things out of the lot of things that are happening all the time. Thus, the Shrutis are not regarded as discrete, self contained, and independent identities. It was understood to be of great difficulty to quantify Shrutis. They were not quantified, they were just left to the understanding of the presenter, rather as a locus traced along a tonal continuum. The Swara are regarded as those regions of the continuum where there is manifestation, illumination, and expression. So, very simply understanding this, we take a train from Chennai to Delhi. There are 7 stops, uh, Warangal and Vijayawada and Nagpur and so on. These are our swaras. Now, in that, if you consider there's a long platform of 2 kilometers in each station, each one of us will get down the train and do our own activities. So, someone will go and buy bananas somewhere else. Half a kilometer later, maybe someone is going to take some water. So because we have our own individual requirements, so you can understand very vaguely the concept of shrutis and swaras. However, shrutis are very very important because they give you the real understanding of a particular mood, and therefore we cannot disregard the concept of shrutis, but it is a quite a ambiguous or a subjective, a matter of subjective aesthetics. Western thought is exactly the opposite, that prefers to place shrutis and swaras in points. So there is always an eagerness, which we all have, of putting things more meticulously in place and try to establish a particular point of a concept or a phenomena. The arrangement of these points has always been a point of contention because shrutis, to as I said, they are little ambiguous in nature. They are quite free in their or abstractish. So it's very difficult to really, really place them precisely in a point. We will now travel briefly through the history of evolution of scales in the Western music world. So I just mentioned how it happened in the ancient Indian music context. Now we are going to look at the ancient Western context, and then we are going to move on to the medieval and the modern times. So when Bharat was doing his 22 Shrutis, a great philosopher, Pythagoras, also invented, or not invented, rather, he kind of, you know, he found out the musical scale, or he discovered the musical scale. And how did he do? So he also went by the same logic of perfect fifth. That is a Sapa combination, the second harmonic, which is very very pleasant to listen to. It is deeply consonating because its mathematical frequency ratio is 3/2. And this is how he started placing his notes. So the first note was the perfect fifth, then there was another perfect fifth, was another note, then another perfect fifth. This is how he placed all his notes because he understood that this is the most consonating distance. So it's nice to keep all our notes related to this distance of supper or perfect fifth. This is how he did. But when we do this, we find out that the if the first uh, octave sa is 240 hertz, the second it doesn't come to a total of 280 double. It's slightly more. And that was known as the Pythagorean comma, and that is why it was kind of little erroneous, because now we understand that probably not all notes can be so much calculated and kept so mechanically. There has to be some more, mathematical understanding and difference in ratios. So this is why Pythagorean scale had this issue, but the concept was very beautiful because it was based on perfect consonance, perfect fifth, therefore. Then came another concept, which is the concept of just intonation. This is very similar to Bharat's concept of swar placement in the 22 microtones, where the whole ratios that I just mentioned previously in the chart. So there were whole ratios, and consonating notes were placed in an octave, and they sounded very warm and beautiful. And most of them were whole ratios, but not perfect fifth like the Pythagorean scale. But there was a problem with these two scales and also the natural scale of Bharat. That is, if there is a phenomena called transposition in music. Transposition means, supposing you have a song in a particular tonic or a particular sa, and if you want to change that, then since the note distribution is uneven, it becomes very difficult to change. So if supposing if I play a piece in A, and if I want to now play it in B as my tonics are, it will be very, because all my note have been arranged not in any order. They are all at a very different distance from each other. So it was not easy to change the tonic. So this is the phenomena of transposition, which is often done in music, and this was not possible. There was another thing that was this is, I've come to the medieval times, when the organs of the churches had become very, very important, integral part of any musical compositions, and they were then evolving into different musical instruments, mostly the key instruments, that is the piano. So this is, the key instruments have got defined sounds. Each, when you press a key, it has one particular note. Now, if you want to change the tonic, it wouldn't be possible, because natural note set is at uneven distance from each other. This is how I will just, yeah. Now you see the natural scale. This is how the note placement happens, where it is uneven. Then, to answer this problem, tempered scale came into being. And this was done mostly keeping the key instrument in account. So with key instruments, this tempered, so what they did was they moved these swaras frequencies, and they made it all equidistant. So now distance between sa to re to ga to ma, everything became similar. So this is how tempered scale came into being, which sorted the problem of natural scale of transposition. That means now you can, since they are all equidistant, you can keep any of these keys as your sa and proceed from there for your song. You won't have any problem. This couldn't have happened in the natural scale set. So this problem was very much sorted out. But if you notice, we have moved our notes and some of them to quite a sizable frequency, and therefore we have entered into the zone of dissonance. Probably they don't consonate anymore the way they would have consonated in natural scale. So this was an issue. Now, so 12 tone equal temperament scale developed in Europe and China in 16th century. In this scale, the 12 notes are placed at equal distance across the octave. This is how it looks mathematically. It makes more sense to you all because you all understand this. So there was geometrical progression in the equal temperament scale, whereas there is in the harmonics series, this is whole ratios and it's an arithmetic progression. So this was the difference. And now if you look at the approximate difference in between the black row, you will see certain notes are quite different from the original, actually, from the natural notes. So this made a rather dissonating set of sounds as compared to the natural sounds, natural scale. This has happened, and I mean, this is something very strange to reveal, that we practice music which is rather dissonant now. The whole world does it because it is based on keys. If the key is there, then this is how generally we have to make an equal tempo. Because see, if you understand it from a little bit logically also, let us take an example of the violin. Violin has no frets, so there's no distinct difference between sa, re, ga. There is, the finger placement happens as per the understanding of the artist. He knows in that long strip of wood where the sa is, where the re is, and then if he wants to tender the re a little bit, he will just move the finger a little bit above. If he wants to sharpen it, he'll just sharpen it a little more, and then ga, and so on and so non-fretted instruments, this facility is there. Similarly, the singer, I don't have any calibration in my throat. My voice can just, it just can just go in a stream. It is not calibrated. But a key is not like that. Key is specific. Sa, re, ga, ma. It can't have anything in between. That's the problem with the keynotes. And to make it even more easier from the point of view of transposition, they made it equidistance. But by doing so, the consonants, the high consonants that existed in the natural scale or in just intonation, had to be compromised with. So now the music that most of the digital music that we listen to from the keyboard, arising from the keyboard, has this big challenge. And I'm going to, with this, we come to another very interesting aspect. Once there is mechanization of music, that means once you have started producing music from these machines, then the calibration is all in your hands. You have just calibrated, 12 notes in an octave, equidistant. If you want, you can make 24. If you want, you can make 48. If you want, you can make 100. You can make any number of notes. You can just, all you have to do is just, make the machine in that order, that it creates that kind of calibration. So, with this, a new era of music happened. We were trying as much as we could, although we were little dissonant in producing our music, and the whole world has been listening to this music for quite some time. But now, we have come up with another and a more futuristic idea where you don't even, why do you who not everyone is agreeing to having just 12 notes. People want more notes. They want probably 24 notes. They want to make their music in 24 notes. So now this new phenomena is starting in certain genres, especially in the genre of video games. If you see the music that we see in the video games, you will find it a little different. I will play it for you. But before that, I would just like to play this particular clip in which instead of 12 notes, we have 24 sections. So, how does it sound then? People are making music in these scales as well, 24 notes, 48 notes, and this is how it sounds. The last slide. So, one of the video games, I've just taken the sound from this video game. I'm sure you're familiar with these sounds when our kids watch and play video games. It's a very strange, dissonating set of sounds, but it's very easy to produce it from a machine. This is all machine produced. And it is just that the calibration is finer than 12. It may be probably 24 or 48 or however they want. Now, again, with this, we come to another aspect of aesthetics. So, anything like have you been listening to dissonating scale for about 200 years now, 300 years? But we are so comfortable with it. So perhaps if this goes, probably these, and through video games, if the child is used to listening to it for all his life, right, since childhood, it's all possible that he could relate to this kind of music and find pleasure in this as well. So this is how aesthetics work also. Aesthetics is also circumstantial and time driven. There are times when we like certain things in certain way. 200 years later, probably that's not the taste of the masses anymore. So this is also a thing about aesthetics, that it has got its time. It's timed, in certain ways. The universal aspect of aesthetic, and also the fact that whatever in the art form, sometimes we must also understand that whatever is supplied to us, or whatever we are subjected to, we get used to it. Now, there has to be a great sense of awareness to contradict that particular fact. If all of us understood all these things, and then we see and we feel, no, the natural scale must exist. It's a matter of choice, of course. But this is also a possibility that probably digital music is the music of the future, and we may hear more of the music which is produced in this manner. So I have traveled right from ancient natural scale to the more equal temperament scale, and then this is the how we can further break. If it is equal, then we can keep breaking it as much as we want to, and keep creating as much sound as we want to. This concept is very contradictory to the aesthetic concept of Bharat. It actually is going to that direction only, but there is no calibration. That is why that point of subjective aesthetics, it's better not to calibrate beyond a point, because it's very incidental. Sometimes we only, when we sing a note, it's not necessary that today I'm singing it in this manner, tomorrow also I will sing the same. I'm a human. It's organic after all. So it might vary by a few frequency. So to keep calibrating it to this fine level is a, it's a matter of discussion, whether it makes sense, or shall we just keep, as Bharat said, that there is a continuum of tonal tones available, and there are, with spots that are illuminated, those are the swaras for better understanding and usage. And then, of course, you can customize those swaras as per your composition or your mood, or the flavor or the rasa that the song requires. So, beyond a point, does aesthetic, can it be defined? Can it be calibrated? I pose a question to all the great mathematicians of this sabha. I'm sure there are many more things that are mystery in when we read the ancient scriptures as well. There are a lot of things that we don't understand. There are a lot of things that we don't understand, which are going to come in future also. But I kind of understood it in this perspective, and I wanted to share it with you all. I hope this was of some interest, and there are many things that can be looked into and researched. How much can you calibrate aesthetics is a point that has come to my mind, and I have no answer to it. With this, I close today's talk. I hope it was of some use to all of you, and at the same time of some interest also. I thank once again Institute of Mathematical Science cultural body led by Anup Dikshit for giving me an opportunity to share my little knowledge that I have about music and whatever I have understood about music. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you. Thank you so much.